what's up you guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I listened to the audiobook version from Audible. This is essentially a historical fiction piece that tells the tale of a woman named Hester Prynne in essentially the New England territory about the late 1600s, early 1700s, and she is now considered an adulteress in her community and has to wear a scarlet A on her clothing in order to mark that she is an adulteress as part of her punishment. This story is more so character heavy as it is a historical fiction novel about an actual real life woman who lived several hundred years ago, so there's not much of a real plot to the story as much as there is just kind of learning about the everyday life of this woman who was considered an adulteress. And the main thing about this story is that she refuses to tell who the father of her child is, and the story jumps to about 7 years after she is first convicted as an adulteress and kind of how things transpire from there. There's really a lot that kind of goes on with the story, and unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to follow a lot of it. I pretty much had to look up the Wikipedia of the Scarlet Letter periodically because unfortunately, for some reason, I wasn't able to follow the story very well, but I think a big part of it is the overall performance of the narrator themselves. The narrator was very, very dry in a lot of the actual prose of the story, but when it got to actual dialogue, it was more entertaining, but it didn't carry out through the whole story, which made it a lot harder for me to delve into. This is also a much older piece, so obviously it's going to be a little bit harder to follow, but I've always felt that if someone is able to perform a older piece very well, it's easy to follow a story that is placed in an older time. And unfortunately, this narrator didn't do as well with it. I'm not even really sure who the narrator was for this story, but his performance of this entire book just was not up to snuff with what I had wanted. It was very dry, very monotone. The dialogue themselves was really great when he actually would incorporate accents and things of that nature for the different pieces of dialogue. Now, as this is dealing with an actual real-life woman's life or possibility of what had happened in her life based on the fact that she was an adulteress in a very still heavily Christian time for the Puritans and the Pilgrims, I can't really say much as to whether or not I thought it was good or not because it's based in fact, but it is also fictionalized to essentially assume what may have happened transpiring from the information that was dug up about this woman and this time period and this specific area of New England. And so there's not really any clear way for me to truly give a full review of it, but I think in terms of an audiobook version of it, it definitely did not live up to the expectations I had. I think if I may have been able to read a physical copy with the audiobook, I might be able to be entertained by it, but I honestly think that having read the physical book would have been much more entertaining and would have been actually much more easier for me to really delve into the story. The actual story itself, though, was really interesting as we were actually following the footsteps of this woman as she was living her day-to-day life and a lot of the prejudices that came to her because of the fact she was an adulteress. It also does a lot in the terms of discussing kind of what happens to the child that is in this kind of a situation, being born to a mother who was an adulteress with an illegitimate father that we do not know the identity of. I do personally think, though, that this novel by itself, audiobook aside, does need to be implemented in things such as like high school, English maybe, because it kind of does delve into some very important themes that people need to be able to understand as they get older. Now, I understand how some people could be turned off from it because the fact that it deals with a woman who is considered an adulteress and is essentially considered blasphemous in this community that she is living in, but I think it really speaks volumes in the fact that it talks about these things in a way that isn't stereotyped. It's more so kind of just showing how people around Hester treat her and how she kind of internalizes it and really just kind of tends to actually ignore a lot of the comments that are made about her because she thinks that what she did was nothing wrong. I think it just really shows a great testament to how we as a society have changed in the term that we haven't changed our views in how we view adultery. We still think that cheating on spouses or significant others is inherently bad. It actually is an awful thing to do. But the difference that is between back in Hester Prynne's time and in our current generation is the type of punishment that is received. We don't actually have a physical way of marking someone, though, as a cheater like Hester Prynne was, which I think is interesting development in the way that we discuss cheating and adultery and things of that nature. And I wonder if it's more so that it's just transferred into the idea of spreading the information to other people as opposed to just actually physically marking them with the Scarlet A. So I wonder if that's kind of just the idea of marking them has just essentially transferred from one generation to the next. And essentially our reviews are not from a religious standpoint, but more so from just a human standpoint, where it's just not right for you to cheat on someone in a relationship if you just don't feel that it's the right relationship for you. There are other ways for you to remove yourself from the relationship, and cheating should not be one of them. I don't think our views on that have essentially changed, but I do think that in the case of Hester Prynne, a lot of it was misunderstood, and a lot of the relationship that she has with the man who we can assume is the father of Pearl, there's a lot more to the story, I think, than people are letting on. But anyway, there you guys go. That's my review of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Overall, I gave this story about 3 stars out of 5, but it definitely was a hard book to listen to because of the narration. I do think, though, that I may try to find the physical copy and reread it to change my rating, because I'm wondering if maybe it was just the fact that I had a bad audiobook that really ruined the experience for me. So I'm gonna leave this as a tentative rating until I can at least find a physical copy to reread The Scarlet Letter in that format and see if my views on it have changed because of it. So keep this in mind, that this is a tentative rating. It's not a solid rating until I can really have a second opinion on it. So yeah, but that's kind of where my stance is at with it, at least in terms of the audiobook version. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this review. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!